The Mandalorian and Grogu is finally hitting the box office. It's here. However, Disney wants you focused on one number. That number being $165 million. Because if The Mandalorian and Grogu only cost $165 million, then a modest opening weekend is not a problem. It's discipline. It's restraint. It's lean, responsible, grown-up Star Wars. If Bob Iger finally discovering the corporate coupon drawer instead of setting a pallet of cash on fire and calling it Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, that is the story. That is the headline number being repeated everywhere. 165 million. Maybe 166 million, depends on which outlet you ask and how hard they squint at the spreadsheet. And if that number is the whole story, Disney gets to walk into Monday morning, Memorial Day, with a very comfortable talking point. Relax. It was cheaper than the sequel trilogy, cheaper than Solo, cheaper than most modern Disney franchise disasters. This is fine. One tiny problem. That number may not mean what they're telling you it means. So today we're not doing another Mando's Gonna Flop video. Everybody's already doing that one. We're doing the forbidden math, the part Disney would very much like you to skip. Because the real question heading into opening weekend is not just whether The Mandalorian and Grogu opens well. The real question, how much does this movie actually need to make to break even? And is the number Disney's defenders keep using even the real bill? So keep your expectations low, your receipts high, and let's start counting some numbers. Welcome back to The Critical Nerd, where we look at Hollywood's numbers, their narratives, and the tiny little asterisks they hope you don't notice until after the press release has already gone out. To all my returning subscribers, a humble thank you and welcome back. You already know what time it is. The spreadsheet is warm, the calculator is angry, and Disney is once again asking us to grade a multi-billion-dollar corporation on a curve. And if you're new here, welcome. Thank you for stopping by. This is the channel where we keep the sarcasm dry, the receipts high, and the expectations somewhere below the Disney stock chart for another franchise quote-unquote reset. So do me a favor, hit like, subscribe, ring that notification bell, because this weekend is going to be very funny, and by funny, I mean financially uncomfortable for at least 3 executives using the phrase long-term brand health in a meeting. Here's the official narrative. The Mandalorian and Grogu is the first theatrical Star Wars movie in 7 years. Wow, 7 years. The last time Star Wars was in theaters, Disney was still pretending The Rise of Skywalker was a satisfying conclusion. The word somehow had not yet become franchise trauma, and Lucasfilm still thought the audience would accept a trilogy planned with the same precision as a group project due at midnight. So Disney needs this movie to look safe. And the easiest way to make a new Star Wars movie look safe is to make it look cheap. Reuters reported the film cost around $165 million to produce, with domestic Memorial Day weekend projections in the $75 to $100 million range. They even cited analyst Jeff Brock suggesting that around $85 million domestic could be considered a success because this movie supposedly cost far less than Disney's prior $300 million plus Star Wars productions. Gabe's Radar also framed this as potentially the cheapest Disney era Star Wars movie, citing $166.4 million with a California tax credit around $21 to $22 million. So the pitch is simple. Relax. This is not another $300 million Star Wars monster. This is a lean Star Wars movie, a responsible Star Wars movie, a physically disciplined Baby Yoda delivery system. And look, compared to some of Disney's recent spending habits, sure. Cheap compared to Solo? Fine. Cheap compared to the sequel trilogy? Absolutely. Cheap compared to the Dial of Destiny, where Disney spent enough money to digitally de-age Harrison Ford and still somehow couldn't de-age the audience's exhaustion? Yes. Congratulations, you cleared the lowest bar in the galaxy. But less insane than Disney's worst spending is not the same thing as profitable. And it is definitely not the same thing as complete. Here's where the story gets interesting. Because that $166 million figure everybody keeps repeating may not be as simple as people are making it sound. Valiant Renegade and That Park Place trace that number back to California Film Commission tax credit filings. Specifically, the filing lists roughly $166.4 million in qualified California production expenditures. And that word qualified is doing more heavy lifting than Grogu's entire marketing department, because qualified expenditures are not automatically the total cost of the movie. They are the expenses that qualify under a specific tax credit program. That can include a lot of below-the-line production spending, crew, set construction, costumes, grips, gaffers, equipment, local production services, the machinery of physically shooting the movie in California. That is real money. Nobody's saying it's fake. The problem is what may not be fully captured there. Above-the-line costs, writers, producers, executive producers, directors, principal cast, voice talent, producer fees, talent compensation, possible renegotiated contracts. You know, the expensive people. Jon Favreau does not work for store credit. Dave Filoni does not show up for a punch card. Kathleen Kennedy is not paid in commemorative Lucasfilm mugs. Pedro Pascal is not getting a direct deposit of Grogu plushies. And Sigourney Weaver did not stroll onto a Star Wars set because someone offered her a coupon for blue milk and parking validation. These are the people whose names actually sell the project. And depending on how the California filing is being interpreted, those costs may not be fully represented in the number being repeated as the budget. Now, to be crystal clear, because this channel runs on receipts, not fan fiction, I'm not saying the $166 million number is fake. I'm saying it may be incomplete, and that distinction matters, because the entire cheap Star Wars narrative depends on the audience treating that one number like it's the full bill. When someone says, relax, it only cost $166 million, the correct response is not, is that a lot? The correct response is, cost who? And for what? According to which filing? Because if that number is qualified California spending, not the entire production cost, then Disney's clean little success story starts getting messy very quickly. And there's another wrinkle here. This project reportedly began life as more Mandalorian for Disney Plus before becoming a theatrical feature. And that kind of matters, because a streaming continuation and a theatrical Star Wars movie are not the same business. The contracts are different. The expectations are different. The compensation can be different. The marketing is definitely different. If you are Jon Favreau and Disney comes to you after The Mandalorian became one of the only things keeping Disney Plus from looking like a very expensive screensaver, and they say, good news, John, that next season, it's now our first theatrical Star Wars movie in 7 years. You're not responding with, wonderful, I will do that for the same money on a churro. No, that's when the agents enter the room. And that's when the agents enter the room, the budget leaves with a limp. That's why this is not just accounting trivia. This goes directly to the profitability story. If the movie really cost $165 million to produce all in before marketing, Disney has one version of the narrative. But if that number is only part of the production picture, then the cheap Star Wars argument gets a little bit weaker. And if the actual production cost is north of that number before we even get to marketing, suddenly this is not a lean little reset. It is much more expensive gamble wearing a budget cosplay helmet. Now let's add the part that never gets included in the production budget. Marketing. I know some of you are going to argue this, but whatever. This movie was not cheap to market. This is the first theatrical Star Wars movie in 7 years. You do not bring Star Wars back to theaters with a polite email and a poster at the bus stop. Disney has been pushing this thing hard. Trailers, premieres, interviews, online campaigns, promotional appearances. The whole Star Wars is finally back in theaters. Please clap tour. Let's not forget the Super Bowl ad. That's not pocket change. That is Disney looking at a giant pile of money and saying, good news, we found a faster way to make it disappear. Industry estimates for a global campaign like this can easily land somewhere in the $120 million to $150 million range. Could it be a little lower? Sure. Could it be higher? Yeah, that's also sure. The point is that marketing is not zero. And Games Radar, when discussing the projected $160 million global opening, specifically noted that this does not include marketing. That matters because a movie does not break even when it earns back its production budget. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Studios do not keep the entire box office. Theaters take a cut. International grosses return less per dollar than domestic. Marketing costs money. Distribution costs money. And Disney does not get to walk into AMC with a bucket and collect every dollar like Grogu begging for space macarons. So when someone says, it made $160 million globally on a $166 million budget, that's fine, but no. That's not math. That is a press release wearing a calculator costume. So let's run the scenarios. And I will tell you which numbers are reported and which numbers are estimates, because unlike Hollywood, they don't show their work, but I'm going to show you the work. First scenario, number one, the Disney-friendly version. Let's say the production budget really is about $165 million. Let's give them a lighter marketing assumption. Even then, once you account for theatrical splits and the fact the studios do not keep every dollar, you're probably looking at a break-even range somewhere around $500 million worldwide. Maybe a little under, maybe a little over, depends on domestic versus international mix. But it is not $165 million. Scenario number two, the realistic blockbuster version. $165 million production, $120 to $150 million in marketing. Now your all-in spend is in the $285 to $315 million range. At that point, break-even pressure starts looking more like $575 to $650 million worldwide. It's not impossible, but it's not relax, Baby Yoda's got this either. That's real money. That is a movie that needs legs. It needs families. It needs repeat business. It needs people who watched Mando on the couch to suddenly decide that the same characters were theatrical prices. Parking, popcorn, and the privilege of sitting next to someone checking TikTok during the third act. And then there's scenario number three. The budget is understated scenario. If the $166 million number is not the complete production cost, if above the line costs, talent deals, producer fees, contract changes, or theatrical adjustments push the actual production spend closer to $200 to $250 million, then add marketing on top of that, now your all-in spend can be north of $350 million. And suddenly the movie may need $700 million or more worldwide to truly be comfortable. Again, I'm not saying the number's confirmed. I'm saying the entire success narrative depends on the lowest number being complete. And Hollywood budget reporting is really that clean. And here's the funny part. The internet's already doing the math. That Park Place is pointing to Valiant Renegade's breakdown, arguing that the true cost may be higher than the headline number because how qualified expenditures work. OMB Reviews is already arguing that even if the movie only cost $165 million to produce, the break-even math still gets ugly once marketing and theatrical splits are included. Other accounts are running the same basic calculations. $166 million production, $100 to $150 million in marketing. Now the movie needs somewhere between $530 and $630 million worldwide just to break even. And no, I'm not telling you every number on X is gospel. It is social media. Half that platform thinks source means a blurry screenshot and confidence. But that's not the point. The point is that everyone is questioning the same thing. Why is Disney's entire success narrative built around the production budget and only the production budget? Because $165 million sounds controlled. It sounds disciplined. It sounds like Disney finally learned something. But if the number is incomplete and marketing is excluded and theatrical splits are ignored, then this is not a cost control story. It's a spend control story. And when the audience in the comments is already saying, don't forget theaters, keep a cut, then Disney does not just have a tracking problem, it has a credibility problem. Now let's be fair, because fair is what makes the knife sharper. This does not prove Disney lied. This does not prove the movie secretly cost $300 million to produce. This does not prove Jon Favreau walked into Lucasfilm with a money cannon and started firing invoices into the ceiling. The official reporting treats the $165 to $166 million figure as the production budget. Some outlets genuinely see that as evidence of cost discipline compared to other Disney-era Star Wars movies. And yes, below-the-line spending on a VFX-heavy Star Wars production can be enormous. Sets, crews, stagecraft, costumes, effects work, production services, that stuff all adds up quickly. So the counter-argument is real. But here's the problem. Even if the $166 million number is valid, the way it's being used is still misleading. because the public conversation keeps treating production budget like a break-even budget. And those are not the same thing. The cleanest version of the argument is not Disney lied. The cleanest version is the number may be narrower than people realize, and the success narrative depends on that number being the full bill. That's the story. Not fraud, not conspiracy, maths. Hollywood's least favorite genre. And this matters beyond one opening weekend. Because The Mandalorian and Grogu is not just a movie, it's a test. It is Disney asking whether theatrical Star Wars still matters after years of training the audience to wait for the couch. It is Disney asking whether a Disney Plus character can be upgraded into box office anchor. It is Disney asking whether Grogu is a movie star, a merchandise machine, or just the most expensive plush toy delivery system in modern entertainment. And the next Star Wars theatrical swing is Starfighter with Ryan Gosling in 2027. So this is not just about whether Mando makes money, it's about whether Disney can rebuild theatrical Star Wars without pretending every release is The Force Awakens. If this movie does well, Disney will say, "See, Star Wars is back." If it underperforms, they will say, "Well, expectations were always modest." And if it lands somewhere in the middle, the spin will depend almost entirely on the budget narrative. That's why this number matters. And if it lands somewhere, because if the break-even bar is 500 million, Disney has one story. If the bar is 650 million, Disney has another. If the bar is closer to 700 million or 800 million, suddenly modest success starts looking like, please don't check the spreadsheets. So where do I land on all this? If The Mandalorian and Grogu really cost what the headline number says it cost, if the marketing was controlled, then yes, Disney can probably survive a modest opening and spin this as a strategic reset. Fine. But if the real all-in number is higher, if the 166 million figure is qualified spending rather than the full production budget, and then you add the people Favreau had to pay, the marketing Disney actually spent, and the theaters taking their cut, then this is not cheap Star Wars. This is expensive Star Wars wearing a budget cosplay helmet. Disney did not necessarily lower the risk. They may have just lowered the headline number. And those things are very different. So this weekend, when the box office numbers start rolling in and the spin machine fires up, do me a favor. Do not grade this movie on the number Disney handed you. Grade it on the bill. Because the real question is not whether Mandalorian and Grogu can beat the lowest expectations Disney can publicly manufacture. The real question is whether theatrical Star Wars is still big enough to justify the real cost of bringing it back. And if the answer is no, well, somehow the accounting returned. Keep your expectations low and your receipts high. And if this breakdown made the math make sense, do me a favor, hit like, subscribe, ring the bell, because we will be tracking the actuals all weekend. And I have a feeling the real story is going to be a lot more interesting than the press release. I'm the Critical Nerd, and I am out.